It's funny. Usually when we talk about like a medical diagnosis,
Hmm.
there is this expectation of just absolute precision.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It feels almost like engineering, right? You
Yeah.
fall off a bike, you break your arm, and the x-ray shows that stark, jagged white line across the bone.
Right.
And the doctor just points at the film and says, well, there it is. It's incredibly clean.
Yeah, it is comforting in its binary nature, you know. I mean, the human mind craves categorization. We really want things to be visible and measurable and easily sorted into like broken or not broken.
Right, exactly. But then you step out of the clinic and you walk into the world of organizational change.
Oh boy.
Yeah, you look at the communication dynamics inside a massive company, and suddenly that x-ray machine just completely shatters.
Yep.
We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky. So today on the College Profs Chalk Talk, we're looking at why the modern workplace feels so confusing
So confusing.
and why the standard universally accepted advice to, just communicate more, why that might actually be destroying your best initiatives.
Yeah, it's a huge issue right now
Yeah.
because the modern workplace is currently operating in this totally unprecedented state of flux.
Yeah.
The sheer volume of adaptation required from both leadership and frontline employees, it's shifting the ground under their feet on a daily basis.
It really is.
And it is creating a profound sense of exhaustion.
Exhaustion is, that's putting it mildly, honestly.
Yeah.
To really understand the scale of what we're talking about, let's look at some of the baseline data from our supporting references for today.
Okay.
There is this Gartner report from 2023 that attempts to quantify what they term change fatigue.
Right.
And they found that the average employee experienced 10 planned enterprise changes in just a 12-month period.
10. That's a lot.
10. Think about what that actually means on the ground. 10 changes in 1 year.
Well, we have to define enterprise change to really grasp the severity of that number, right? Because we aren't talking about, a memo announcing a new coffee vendor in the break room.
Right. Not just a new flavor of Keurig pod.
Exactly. These are structural cognitive shifts. So it means learning an entirely new enterprise software system in January.
Oh, the worst.
Right. And then it means a complete management reorganization in March.
Yeah.
It means a revised performance review structure in June, followed by, say, a sudden shift from a remote work policy to a strict hybrid mandate in September.
It's just nonstop.
Processing 10 of those systemic disruptions in a single calendar year, that requires a monumental expenditure of cognitive energy.
And when you drain people's cognitive energy that aggressively, the consequences are just disastrous.
Oh, entirely.
Like the same Gartner data shows the fallout. Back in 2016, if a company announced a major pivot, a solid 74% of employees were willing to support that change.
Which is pretty good.
Right, pretty high. But by 2022, that number had completely collapsed to 43%.
Wow.
Yeah. Less than half your workforce is actually on board. The majority are just actively or passively resisting.
It is a staggering drop. But, viewing it simply as a corporate attitude problem is a huge mistake.
What do you mean?
Well, to understand the why behind that resistance, we can look at the insights of Professor John P. Cotter. He's heavily cited in our supporting references.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah, and he frames this not as a behavioral issue, but as a biological one.
Oh, biological.
Yeah, human beings are evolutionary creatures,
Right.
and our evolutionary history fundamentally biases us towards stability.
Because historically, an unexpected change usually meant something was hunting you.
Right.
Predictability kept you alive.
That is the core mechanism, exactly. We
Right.
are emotional beings long before we are rational corporate actors.
Yeah.
Change inherently tripwires the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear and threat.
Right.
So when a CEO stands up and cheerfully announces a massive operational pivot, the employee listening doesn't immediately ponder the increased quarterly shareholder value.
No, definitely not.
No, their brain goes straight to survival mode. They wonder if this new software makes their role obsolete.
Right.
They worry about their compensation structure. They fear the loss of their established mastery.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like, if I've spent the last 8 years mastering a specific workflow, my value to the company, essentially my security, is tied to that mastery.
Exactly.
So if you change the workflow, you are temporarily resetting my value to 0.
And that loss of control is terrifying to the human brain.
Yeah.
Now, the traditional management wisdom on how to overcome this deeply rooted biological resistance, it's incredibly uniform.
Right.
Cotter himself famously noted that one of the absolute most common errors executives make is under-communicating their vision for change by a factor of 10.
A factor of 10.
Yeah. The prevailing philosophy is that transformation requires capturing the hearts and minds of your workforce, and the only vehicle for that is relentless, credible, transparent communication.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where my brain starts to hurt a little bit. We have this universally accepted playbook that says communication is the ultimate cure, right? We see the case studies everywhere, Satya Nadella taking over Microsoft and using constant open dialogue to shift their culture.
Classic example.
Or Netflix navigating its pivot from mailing DVDs to global streaming by heavily prioritizing two-way internal communication.
Right.
So the absolute golden rule seems to be just talk more, explain more, listen more.
That is the accepted paradigm across almost every business school curriculum today.
But if communication is the universal medicine, why do leaders so frequently dig their own graves when they try to talk their way out of a crisis?
Oh, it happens all the time.
Right. Think about every time a new, unproven initiative faces public criticism. The leader steps up, they try to over-communicate, they try to defend the plan, and somehow the defense itself becomes a massive disaster.
It happens constantly. I mean, the leader releases a 10-page internal memo to set the record straight, and by noon, that memo is being mocked on social media and has spawned, 3 new articles about how defensive the leadership team is.
Yes. So what are we missing here? If talking more is always better, why does explaining yourself so often weaponize the resistance against you?
Well, to answer that, we really have to examine the specific conditions under which that communication is happening.
Okay.
There is a fascinating analysis in our supporting references that looks at a very specific pop culture moment to explain this exact trap.
Oh, the Ted Lasso thing.
Yes, it breaks down a scenario from the television show Ted Lasso, specifically looking at the episodes Smells Like Mean Spirit and 451.
I love this example so much. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, let's set the stage real quick.
Go for it.
You have a leader, Coach Lasso, who is trying to introduce a brand new, highly complex tactical approach to his team. It's called total football.
Right.
But the critical complication here is that the team is currently losing, and there are absolutely zero results to back up this new strategy.
Right. They have no proof it works.
None. It is entirely unproven. And simultaneously, Coach Lasso is being publicly, aggressively criticized in the press by a former assistant coach, Nate, who has a ton of credibility and insider knowledge.
It is the ultimate nightmare scenario for any leader.
Seriously.
Whether you are coaching a sports team or running a tech company, your internal team is already biologically wired to resist this unproven change.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, an authoritative external voice is amplifying their deepest fears, publicly declaring that you are incompetent and the plan is doomed.
If I'm in that leader's shoes, every instinct in my body is screaming at me to fight back.
Right.
I'd want to call a press conference, pull up the data, and just systematically dismantle every single thing the critic said. It feels like the only responsible professional thing to do.
It feels professional because we are taught that leaving an accusation unanswered is a dereliction of duty,
Right. You have to defend yourself.
You want to correct the factual inaccuracies. But the analysis of the scenario points out why this instinct is frequently a fatal trap.
A trap?
Yeah, it comes down to the cognitive science of how the human brain processes language and framing. When you repeat an accusation, even if your explicit goal is to aggressively deny it, you're actually extending the lifespan of the critic's framing.
Wait, how does that work, though? If I come out and say the allegations are entirely false, shouldn't that kill the story?
It doesn't. Because of how memory and association function, think of George Lakoff's famous cognitive framing exercise. Don't think of an elephant.
Right. The second you say that, all I can think about is an elephant.
Precisely. The brain must first construct the concept of the elephant in order to attempt to negate it.
Oh, wow.
Right. But the negation, the don't, is a secondary, weaker cognitive process. The core imagery survives.
That is wild.
So if a critic accuses your company of, say, mishandling user data, and your CEO releases a statement saying, we absolutely did not mishandle user data.
The audience's brain is still stuck on the data issue?
Exactly. The audience's brain is still forced to repeatedly link your company's name with the phrase, mishandle user data. You are spending your own institutional resources to refresh the neural pathways of your enemy's attack.
It's like accidentally hitting reply all to a company-wide email chain just to yell at everyone to stop replying all.
Yes.
You aren't stopping the noise. You are literally becoming the noise. You are feeding the monster you're trying to starve.
That's a great way to put it. Furthermore, when we look at the dual problems in this scenario, the unproven plan and the public criticism, they interact in a very dangerous way.
How so?
Well, what's fascinating here is that when an organization is transitioning to a new philosophy and there are no tangible results yet,
Hmm.
the audience has nothing objective to evaluate.
Right?
They can't look at a profit and loss statement to see if the new strategy works.
Because it hasn't happened yet. They're flying blind.
Exactly. In the absence of data, human beings will substitute the leader's personal credibility for the plan's credibility.
Okay, I see.
If the team implicitly trusts the leader, they will extend a temporary loan of trust to the unproven plan. The leader's reputation becomes the load-bearing pillar for the entire initiative.
I see where this is going. If the leader's personal reputation is the only thing holding the plan together, and the external critic starts attacking that reputation, well, the leader has to use their communication to do double duty.
They do. The leader's message now has to advance the difficult, unproven plan while simultaneously functioning as a shield against the public criticism.
Which is exhausting.
But this is the crux of the trap. If a leader devotes the majority of their time, energy, and communication bandwidth to defending themselves against the critic, rather than relentlessly advancing the details of the vision, the leader has already lost.
Because they've let the critic hijack the steering wheel. The critic is dictating the topic of conversation.
They are playing entirely on the critic's home turf. Every defensive statement validates the premise that the critic's opinion is worthy of debate.
Okay, so this creates a massive paradox. If talking feeds the story, and defending yourself validates the critic's framing, and repeating the accusation just sears it into people's brains, how on earth does a leader maintain their authority? Like, what do you do when the microphone is in your face?
You utilize the weapon of strategic silence.
Strategic silence. Okay, I want to be really clear about what we mean here, because if you look at the definitions from our supporting references, specifically the sociologists and researchers who study this, we aren't just talking about drawing a blank or hiding under your desk hoping the problem goes away.
Far from it. If you look at how sociologists and crisis communication experts define this, strategic silence is a highly weaponized pause.
Weaponized pause. I like that.
Yeah, it is the intentional, calculated withholding of speech to achieve a specific behavioral outcome in your audience. It is an active, aggressive decision.
So it's choosing not to play a card, which, in a high-stakes game, is a move all on its own.
It is often the most powerful move on the board. The reference material maps out a brilliant framework for understanding this, breaking down crisis responses into 3 distinct strategies:
Right.
denial, reframing, and strategic silence. And the critical mistake most leaders make is assuming these are just stylistic choices.
Oh, they're not.
No, they aren't. Each strategy is a specific tool designed for a specific audience.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's walk through these, because I think identifying the audience is where people trip up.
Sure.
Let's start with denial. When does a leader actually use a simple, flat denial?
You use denial for an audience that does not yet believe the accusation and can still be easily persuaded away from it.
So if a wild rumor just started circulating this morning on Slack,
Mhm.
and people are confused but haven't made up their minds, a swift, flat denial can squash it.
It can, but it is a ticking clock. A flat denial only works if you catch the rumor before it calcifies into a belief. If you wait 48 hours and the narrative has taken root, a simple "that's not true" is utterly useless. It will just be read as a cover-up.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the second strategy, reframing?
Reframing serves an audience that has already heard the accusation. They likely believe the underlying facts of what occurred, but they are open to a different interpretation of those facts.
Yep.
You aren't denying the event. You are providing the missing context that changes the meaning of the event.
So it's yes, the server crashed on launch day, but here's the broader context of the massive traffic spike we absorbed that actually shows how resilient the core architecture is. That kind of approach.
Precisely. You concede the reality, but you alter the lens through which it is viewed.
Right.
But then we arrive at the third strategy, strategic silence. This serves a very narrow, incredibly specific purpose. You use strategic silence to protect your credibility with an audience that already trusts you.
Wait, why would you need to protect your credibility with people who already like you? Wouldn't they be the most receptive to you defending yourself?
Because aggressively defending yourself against a baseless or bad faith attack signals insecurity.
Oh.
When you deploy strategic silence toward a hostile critic, you are sending a very clear, nonverbal signal to your loyal base. You are saying, this criticism is so disconnected from our shared reality, so profoundly beneath our standards, that acknowledging it would grant it a dignity it does not deserve.
Ah, I see. You are demonstrating absolute composure.
Yeah.
You're showing that you are entirely unbothered.
You project a quiet, unshakable confidence. However, the course material is very clear about the heavy toll this takes.
There's always a cost, right?
Silence has a severe cost.
What's the bill that comes due when you stay quiet? Because I have to imagine you are leaving a lot of people frustrated.
You absolutely are. It costs you your standing with any audience who reads silence as an admission of guilt.
Wow, yeah.
To an audience that doesn't already trust you, or to a neutral observer who only sees the accusation and your lack of a defense, your silence looks highly suspicious.
Right.
It can look like cowardice, or an inability to muster a coherent response.
Wait, so you're saying I have to just, well, let certain people believe the worst about me? How does a leader actually swallow their pride and do that? It sounds agonizing.
It is incredibly difficult, which is why most leaders fail at it. They want to save everyone. They want to win over the critic, reassure the skeptics, and validate the loyalists, all with one statement.
Yeah, that's human nature.
That there is no single communication decision that serves every audience equally well. The true skill of crisis leadership is triage.
Triage.
It is looking at the board, deliberately choosing which audience's interpretation matters the most for the survival of the initiative in that specific moment, and accepting the painful losses with the other audiences.
It really is triage. You are looking at the bleeding patient and making a cold, calculated decision about who you have to save and who you have to let go of in the narrative battle.
Yes, that is exactly it.
Okay, so understanding the theory here is fascinating, but deploying this in the real world seems incredibly perilous.
It is.
Walking the tightrope of a highly calibrated silence without just looking aloof, checked out, or arrogant. How do you actually execute that? Let's look at how this plays out across different industries, drawing on the research from Dr. Jonathan Westover and our supporting references.
Dr. Westover provides some vital situational examples. Let's examine healthcare administration first, because it is an environment characterized by chronic high stress and literal life or death stakes.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine a hospital administrator who has to stand in front of their clinical staff and deliver incredibly difficult news. Perhaps sweeping budget cuts, nursing layoffs, or highly restrictive new patient care protocols.
Which instantly triggers the exact biological amygdala-driven resistance Cotter talked about earlier.
Yes, exactly.
And nurses aren't thinking about the hospital's operating margin. They're thinking about how they're going to do their jobs safely tomorrow. The room is going to be incredibly emotionally charged.
Highly volatile. Now, the natural instinct of an administrator in that moment is to deliver the bad news and then immediately rush to fill the void with justifications.
Right.
Defensive reassurances, and a barrage of data points about why this is necessary.
Let me show you the spreadsheet that proves why we had to fire your friend.
Which is the worst possible approach. Westover notes that an effective administrator will deliver the difficult reality and then deliberately hold a profound silence.
They just stopped talking.
They stop talking. Why? Because from a neurological standpoint, humans need time to process shock. When you immediately start talking over their initial wave of grief or panic, they don't hear your logic, they only perceive your words as defensive noise.
You're arguing with their emotions.
And you cannot win an argument with an activated amygdala. By holding the silence, the administrator provides a container for the shock to settle. It gives the staff the necessary psychological space to process the reality, which actually absorbs and mitigates the immediate aggressive resistance.
Wow.
The silence proves you aren't running away from the pain you just caused.
That's incredibly powerful. You're just standing there bearing witness to their reaction without trying to manage it. Let's look at another example. Tech entrepreneurship. This is a totally different vibe.
A completely different environment, but the psychological principles remain the same. Picture a startup founder in a high-stakes pitch meeting with seasoned venture capitalists.
Okay.
The founder has 20 minutes. The amateur move is to cram every single microscopic detail, every feature, and every financial projection into the presentation, talking frantically right up to the 19th minute and 59th second.
Right, trying to build an impenetrable wall of information so the investors can't possibly find a hole in the business model.
But the seasoned founder does something different. They deliver the core value proposition, And then they deliberately reserve a significant portion of the time at the end, say 5 full minutes, and yield the floor.
They just sit there.
They invite questions, and then they embrace the quiet while the investors review their notes.
Why does that work? Why wouldn't the investors just think the founder ran out of material?
Because seasoned investors aren't just evaluating the product, they are evaluating the psychology of the founder.
Oh, that makes sense.
Overtalking reeks of insecurity. It signals an underlying fear that the product cannot stand on its own merits. When a founder deliberately pauses and holds space for scrutiny, it demonstrates a profound, internalized comfort with uncertainty.
Right.
It signals, I know this domain so thoroughly that I am not afraid of whatever question you are about to formulate in this silence. I can think on my feet.
It's almost like martial arts, like Aikido.
How do you mean?
Well, in Aikido, the whole philosophy is that you don't meet force with opposing force. You don't block a punch by punching back. You step aside and let the attacker's own momentum carry them past you.
Yes.
You use their energy against them without expending your own. If an angry critic is yelling at you in a meeting and you just sit there in complete attentive silence, eventually the audience stops looking at you and starts looking at the critic.
Exactly.
The critic starts to look unhinged because they are sparring with a ghost.
Yeah.
If you yell back, you give them a dance partner. You legitimize their aggression.
That is an exceptionally accurate analogy. You are letting their momentum exhaust itself in a vacuum. But that vacuum is also where the danger lies.
Right.
The Wikipedia entry in our supporting references provides a crucial warning about what we can call the ambiguity risk.
The ambiguity risk. Because a vacuum has to be filled with something.
Always. The fundamental power of strategic silence is its inherent ambiguity. When you are silent, you force the other party to project their own internal narrative into that space.
Right, they fill the gap.
It forces introspection, which gives you the leverage you described in your Aikido analogy. However, that exact same ambiguity means you completely surrender control of the narrative.
You can't control what they're projecting.
You cannot. While you might intend for your silence to project thoughtful restraint, quiet confidence, or deep empathy, the employee sitting across from you might misconstrue it as cold indifference, staggering arrogance, or passive-aggressive hostility.
Oh, yeah. That's a huge risk.
In a crisis, a pause is vital to assess a chaotic situation and avoid making ill-informed panic statements. But the line between a strategic, calculated pause and what the audience perceives as complete, paralyzing disengagement is razor thin.
And if you hold that musical rest for too long, the orchestra thinks the conductor just had a stroke.
Exactly. And we also have to factor in cultural context, which drastically complicates the interpretation.
How so?
In many Eastern cultures, silence in a business negotiation is deeply valued. It signals respect, careful consideration, and wisdom.
Right.
In many Western corporate environments, prolonged silence is incredibly uncomfortable and is often viewed as evasive, confrontational, or a sign of incompetence.
So you have to know your audience's cultural baseline before you try to use silence as a tool.
You must. If an audience is desperately expecting communication, if they are frightened about layoffs and you give them prolonged silence, you aren't projecting confidence, you are exacerbating their terror and building massive barriers to future trust.
Okay, this brings us to a really critical juncture in the Chalk Talk. We've established that you can use strategic silence like a scalpel.
Yes.
You can use it to starve out hostile critics. You can use it to let the emotional shock of bad news settle. And you can use it to project confidence to investors. But silence is fundamentally defensive.
Yes.
You cannot build a new enterprise software system with silence.
Yeah.
You cannot restructure a global supply chain with silence. At some point, you have to transition from withholding communication to actually getting people to implement your unproven vision.
That is the pivotal transition. Silence clears the debris from the road, but it is not the engine that drives the car forward.
So how do we make that pivot? How do we go from the defensive pause to aggressive transmission? Our supporting references, going back to the Ted Lasso analysis, introduce a concept that I think is the key to this entire puzzle, the rule of repeatability.
This rule is the ultimate stress test for any leader trying to implement a plan that doesn't yet have data to back it up. The premise is brutal but true. For an unproven vision to survive transmission through the layers of an organization, it must be repeatable by the people who did not create it.
So it's the ultimate game of organizational telephone.
It is. Think about a CEO standing in a boardroom. They can deliver the most inspiring, logically flawless, beautifully articulated explanation of a new corporate strategy.
Right.
The slide deck can be perfect, But if the middle managers, the frontline supervisors, and the early adopters walk out of that boardroom and cannot restate that strategy in their own words in a way that preserves the core intent, the vision is already dead.
It doesn't matter how eloquent the CEO was. If the message requires the CEO's personal charisma to make sense, it cannot scale.
Precisely.
Right.
And this connects directly back to the research on change management from Populo in our references.
Okay.
When a vision is too complex or defensive to be repeatable, it results in a profound lack of awareness among the broader employee base. They hear noise, but they don't understand the why. And according to Prache's change management data, the absolute #1 cause of employee resistance is a lack of awareness about the underlying business reasons for the change.
So if I'm a frontline employee and my manager comes to me and says, we're doing this new workflow because the boss said so, my resistance immediately spikes.
Of course.
But if my manager says we're doing this new workflow because our old system is causing a 20% delay in client onboarding and this fixes it, I might still be annoyed, but I understand the logic.
You have given them the why. You have respected their intelligence.
So synthesizing everything we've pulled apart today, it seems like modern leadership requires a really uncomfortable mastery of behavioral gear shifting.
Gear shifting, yes.
On one hand, you have to use strategic silence to deal with the external critics, the bad faith actors, or the office gossips who just want to drag you into a mudslinging match. You deny them the oxygen of your response.
Right.
But simultaneously, behind closed doors with your team, you have to execute aggressively clear, highly redundant two-way communication to empower your internal influencers.
It is a delicate synthesis of two radically different postures, and the Populo framework provides the blueprint for that internal phase.
What does that look like?
It emphasizes that this cannot just be one-way broadcasting. You can't just send a newsletter. You must involve employees early. You must identify the employee influencers, both the positive champions and the negative skeptics, and bring them into the fold.
And the references are pretty explicit about not hiding from the negative influencers, right? It suggests sitting down for one-on-one meetings with the most resistant people. You go right into the belly of the beast to listen to their fears, bringing us all the way back to Cotter's point about evolutionary dread.
You sit with the resistance. You listen with genuine empathy to understand exactly what loss of control they are fearing.
Yeah.
Then you clarify the reasons for the change, you systematically dismantle their specific misconceptions, and you make sure that leadership support is highly visible. This targeted, empathetic engagement is how you slowly override the biological bias toward the status quo.
It sounds exhausting.
It is the hardest part of the job. Leadership is not about finding one communication style and sticking to it.
Right.
It is about anticipation. You must anticipate the specific localized skepticism of each affected audience within your organization and calibrate your response, whether that is a detailed technical explanation, an empathetic listening session, or absolute silence accordingly.
You really have to be a surgeon. The lazy way out is defaulting to your natural personality. Either you're the person who constantly rebuts every minor criticism, or you're the person who hides behind a wall of blanket silence and hopes things blow over.
Yes.
The hard work is doing both, selectively.
The targeted application of opposites.
This has been incredibly insightful. Let's bring this directly down to earth for everyone listening, because this isn't just for Fortune 500 CEOs.
Definitely not.
Whether you are prepping to roll out a new software tool to your 5-person team next week, or you are trying to navigate a really toxic rumor mill about upcoming department restructuring, the practical takeaway here is deeply empowering. You do not have to swing at every pitch.
That is the core lesson. Identify exactly who you are communicating for in any given moment. What is the behavioral outcome you need from that specific person? If a critic doesn't matter to your core mission, do not spend your institutional credibility arguing with them.
Use silence to regulate your own nervous system. When you feel that hot surge of defensiveness in your chest, that desperate, ego-driven need to correct the record and prove someone wrong, take the pause. Recognize that overtalking usually just exposes your own insecurities.
Let the critic exhaust themselves in a vacuum. Reserve your energy for crafting a vision so brutally clear, so logical, and so empathetic that your team can repeat it to each other when you aren't even in the room.
Build the vision, starve the noise.
Precisely.
As we wrap up this edition of the College Prof's Chalk Talk, I want to leave you with one final, slightly unnerving thought to mull over.
Oh, I'm ready.
We have spent this entire time talking about the power of one leader utilizing strategic silence. We know that when one person does it, it creates this massive, heavy ambiguity that forces everyone else in the room to introspect, to project, and to fill the void.
Right. It's very powerful.
But extrapolate that out for a second. What happens if an entire organization or an entire executive leadership team decides to culturally adopt strategic silence at the exact same time?
It is a profound hypothetical.
Does that create some kind of beautiful Zen utopia of profound thoughtfulness? A place where everyone experiences deep psychological safety because no one is reacting impulsively and everyone is carefully weighing their words?
Maybe.
Or does it result in a terrifying, paralyzed vacuum of paranoia? Picture an entire boardroom of executives sitting around a mahogany table, aggressively withholding speech, deploying weaponized pauses at each other, just trying to outweight the room to see who cracks and blinks first.
A fascinating paradox to consider. The line between wisdom and dysfunction is entirely contextual.
Something to ponder the next time you find yourself in a meeting that has stayed quiet just a little too long. Until next time, keep analyzing the chalkboard.